Conservatives say you are jetting around but getting nothing done. You've met with numerous leaders while you've been here, but you're not signing a new deal or making, announcing a new partnership. What have you achieved tangibly for Canadians during this trip?
Prime Minister Mark Carney has spent the past 2 weeks flying from New York to Mexico and then on to London, showcasing Canada on the world stage. He stood in front of investors, met European leaders, and promoted what he called a new era of Canadian opportunity. But at home, the numbers tell a very different story. Statistics Canada reported that gross domestic product grew by only 0.2% in July after 3 straight months of contraction. Economists warn that this rebound is fragile, driven by a temporary uptick in mining and auto parts, not by lasting strength. For ordinary Canadians, there is no sense of recovery. Job creation has stalled since the start of the year, private investment has collapsed, and uncertainty is choking businesses. While Carney jets across continents, the Canadian economy is gasping for air. The heaviest blows are still coming from the South. Washington's tariffs have hit steel, aluminum, lumber, furniture, cabinets, and heavy trucks. For Algoma Steel, once a pillar of Canadian industry, the U.S. market is now closed under a 50% duty. Ottawa and Ontario were forced to pump $500 million in emergency loans just to keep the company alive. The reality is grim. Steel output has fallen 25% compared to the beginning of the year, aluminum is down 9%, and thousands of workers face an uncertain future. Even the slight July GDP increase is seen by economists as the result of one-off orders rather than a real turnaround. President Trump, meanwhile, is pressing ahead with new rounds of tariffs. His reciprocal policy leaves allies scrambling while America dictates the terms. For Canada, still overwhelmingly dependent on the U.S. market, there is no escape.
And if Washington's wall was not enough, Beijing has slammed another door shut. In August, China imposed a 75.8% duty on Canadian canola seeds. That follows 100% tariffs earlier this year on canola oil, canola meal, peas, pork, and seafood. The impact is devastating. Saskatchewan alone seeded 12 million acres of canola in 2025. The national industry is worth 43 to 45 billion Canadian dollars annually, sustaining over 200,000 jobs. 1/3 of those exports once went to China, a market valued at $5 billion every year. That trade has now collapsed overnight. Premier Scott Moe called it a devastating blow, warning of plummeting prices and stranded farmers just as the harvest began. Canola, larger than steel, aluminum, and auto manufacturing combined, has been caught in the crossfire of a global trade war. The picture is unmistakable. The United States punishes Canada's metals, and China shuts down its agriculture.
Through all this, Carney continues to tout his global agenda. He points to a new free trade deal with Indonesia, a framework with the European Union, action plans with Mexico, and talks with the United Kingdom. Yet these are long-term promises, not immediate relief. None of them replace the jobs already lost in steel towns or the income vanishing from prairie farms. At home, households are draining their savings just to keep up with higher costs. Private investment in productive capital is falling. Even Canada Post is losing $10 million every single day. The rhetoric of energy superpower and one Canadian economy sounds hollow when the foundations are crumbling. Canadians see clearly. Carney can circle the globe, but he cannot shield them from the twin storms of Washington and Beijing. Unless he delivers real results in the coming US-Mexico-Canada review, the backfire will only deepen. For families, farmers, and workers, the worst may still lie ahead.
Now, all of this comes as Canada looks to diversify its trade portfolio in the face of Trump's tariffs. And earlier this week, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a new economic and security agreement with Mexico. And just yesterday, Canada's finance minister held talks in Denmark with European Union officials.
Canada once counted the United States as its anchor in trade. That anchor has now been cast aside. Faced with Washington's tariff storm, Prime Minister Mark Carney is signaling that America is no longer the ally to lean on. Within days of signing a deal with Mexico, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne rushed to Europe for strategic talks. Ottawa wants the world to see strength. In reality, it looks like desperation. Turning to Brussels in this moment is not a show of confidence. It is Canada clutching at a straw, betting on a partner whose own house is in chaos. The move is sold as diversification, but it risks exposing Canada to even greater instability. Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs were designed to force Canada back to the table. The White House raised duties on cars, metals, and farm exports, confident that Ottawa could not survive with access to the U.S. market. That bet was not wrong. Nearly 80% of Canadian trade still flows south. Instead of facing that reality, Carney is trying to project defiance abroad. He prefers photo ops in Mexico City and talking points in Denmark rather than confronting Washington directly. By avoiding a real showdown with the United States, his government signals weakness. Even allies recognize that Ottawa is reacting rather than leading, chasing headlines instead of securing binding commitments. It may look like Canada is building new bridges, but the truth is harsher. By avoiding its largest market, Canada is putting jobs, factories, and farms at risk. This is not leverage, it is retreat. Carney and Champagne are pointing to Europe as a lifeline, yet the continent they are chasing is anything but stable. Look closer and the cracks are everywhere. For example, in France, hundreds of thousands filled the streets to protest budget cuts and foreign aid. In the United Kingdom, the government is drowning in unemployment, rising prices, and record-breaking waves of illegal migration. And in Germany, the economic engine of Europe is sputtering. Industry is shrinking, energy costs have exploded, and iconic automakers are closing plants. The loss of access to cheap Russian oil and gas, which once kept factories competitive and energy costs under control, has only made the situation worse. More than half of German companies plan layoffs, while a third are considering moving production abroad. This is the fragile bloc Ottawa is now courting. Betting on a fractured EU to replace American demand is a dangerous illusion. Europe cannot even stabilize itself. To believe it can rescue Canada is wishful thinking at best. The pattern is clear. Trump raises tariffs, and instead of negotiating with Washington, Carney runs to far-flung capitals. Mexico and Europe are paraded as alternatives, yet neither changes the math. America is Canada's lifeline, and China is Canada's second-largest market. Both are tightening the screws. Europe, meanwhile, is paralyzed by protests, political turmoil, and industrial decline. This leaves ordinary Canadians trapped in the middle. Families are already struggling with higher grocery bills, while small businesses face rising costs for materials and shipping. Farmers see their markets shrinking, and manufacturers watch investment drift away. The promise of diversification sounds good in speeches, but on the ground it means uncertainty, layoffs, and less security for workers who depend on steady trade. The gamble is obvious. Carney is risking Canada's economy on partners who cannot deliver. Canadians know what this means. It means higher prices at home, lost markets abroad, and industries caught in the squeeze between Washington and Beijing. Far from strengthening Canada's hand, this strategy leaves the country more vulnerable than ever. What is being sold as diversification is in fact a retreat into weakness. And if nothing changes, the consequences for Canadian workers and families will only grow worse in the months ahead.
They want to see if they can refine the trade deal a little bit. We made a deal, and it's a great deal. And I'm into helping them. Our country is doing very well.
Despite Trump's comments, the U.S. is reportedly walking away from plans to end steel and aluminum tariffs in the U.K., raising questions over how the rest of the world could be affected.
The pictures from London say it all. Donald Trump arriving at Chequers, shaking hands with Prime Minister Keir Starmer, ready to refine a trade deal that already gives Britain a privileged seat at the table. The United States has shielded the UK from the worst of its global steel tariffs, sparing them from the crushing 50% levy that the rest of the world must pay. Britain walks away with a capped 25% rate and the promise of a broader framework on technology and energy. Meanwhile, Canada is nowhere to be seen. There are no ceremonies, no warm receptions, no carve-outs. Ottawa, once considered America's closest partner, is suddenly standing outside the room. Under Mark Carney's leadership, Canada is being treated as an afterthought, forced to watch as others secure deals and protections. The American demand is brutally clear. To earn relief, partners must prove that their steel is melted and poured at home, blocking any chance for Chinese material to slip through. For the UK, this is already a serious hurdle, with its producers tied to imports from India and Turkey. For Canada, it is a brick wall. 2/3 of the steel consumed in Canada is imported, much of it from China and other offshore suppliers. The Carney government has no real answer to this challenge. Ottawa can raise tariffs or issue promises, but Washington is demanding verifiable proof that foreign steel is cut out of the chain. That bar is impossibly high for a country so dependent on imports. What America has done is set conditions that Canada cannot meet, ensuring Ottawa will remain trapped under punishing tariffs while allies like the UK negotiate exemptions. Across the Atlantic, the UK joins Europe, Japan, and South Korea in striking frameworks with Washington. Each country gains clarity, each country carves out protections. Canada, by contrast, is left in the shadows. The only path left for Ottawa is to beg for sector-by-sector concessions. Aluminum is seen as a possible opening, but even there progress is slow. Steel is a deadlock, with Canada's dependence on imports leaving no credibility at the table. Pharmaceuticals add yet another headache, as the United States zeroes in on Canada's drug pricing system and generic exports. The contrast is glaring. While Trump secures high-profile meetings and agreements abroad, Carney's Canada is reduced to damage control, scrabbling to patch holes while industries at home bleed competitiveness. The image is one of a country shoved to the sidelines, humiliated in full view of its people and its trading partners. The outcome is devastating. Trump emerges with a stronger hand, using tariffs as leverage to dictate terms and cut China out of supply chains. The UK, Europe, and Asia all find ways to adapt. Canada finds only rising costs and stalled negotiations. Factories depending on affordable steel and aluminum face shrinking margins. Construction projects already battered by high interest rates now face higher input costs. Thousands of jobs tied to metals and manufacturing are at risk, and communities that depend on those industries are bracing for the worst. Yet Carney offers little more than vague reassurances. The reality is unmistakable. Canada has lost its priority status, downgraded to the back of the line. Unless there is a dramatic shift in policy to reduce dependence on imports, the country will remain on the receiving end of America's trade hammer. For Canadian workers and families, that means higher prices, lost jobs, and the prospect of even deeper pain ahead.
So today, as you know, Canada's new government is announcing the first set of projects that we believe are both in Canada's national interest and are feasible to be built.
That's just a Liberal pipe dream that they talk about forever. There's no oil pipeline on there. There's no plan for an oil pipeline. And these are baby steps that will not unleash the economy.
The warning signs are everywhere. While Donald Trump is accelerating America's economy with sweeping tariff leverage and rapid approvals, Canada is stumbling. Prime Minister Mark Carney promised Canadians a bold new era of nation building, urging the country to think big and act bigger. Yet, when the first list of so-called major projects was unveiled, what Canadians saw were recycled announcements and baby steps. LNG Canada Phase 2, the Darlington nuclear project, and an expanded Montreal port were already in motion long before Carney took office. Rebranding old projects does not create momentum, and it certainly does not meet the urgency of this moment. Instead of leading, Ottawa is lagging behind, while allies and competitors race forward. Families who were promised bold action are left asking, is this really all Canada can offer? The contrast could not be sharper. In Washington, Trump's administration has made deregulation a centerpiece, clearing permits at record speed and sending a clear message to investors: America is open for business. That approach has already pulled billions of dollars south. Enbridge and TC Energy, two of Canada's largest energy firms, openly admitted that most of their capital spending is shifting to the United States. Why? Because Canadian rules like Bill C-69, the emissions cap, and the tanker ban make new investment nearly impossible. Every delay, every layer of red tape pushes jobs and dollars out of Canada and into Trump's America. While our neighbor gains strength, Carney's government leaves Canadians with nothing but bureaucracy and excuses. Even smaller companies now face a brutal choice. Keep waiting years for approvals at home or move operations to the U.S., where permits are granted in months. This is how a nation loses its competitiveness. Carney talks about a future of clean energy, AI-driven electrification, and national infrastructure, but his own policies stand in the way. Pipelines remain absent. An energy corridor connecting provinces, which could reduce dependence on the U.S. and open access to global markets, is nowhere on his list. Instead, the government hides behind legal jargon, claiming no private proponent exists. But industry leaders are clear. They will not invest under today's hostile framework. Even Carney himself admitted in meetings that he has a caucus to manage, signaling that internal liberal factions are dictating national policy. The environmental wing of his party demands restrictions, and the result is paralysis. Big promises meet small actions, and Canadians pay the price. Provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, rich in resources, are sidelined, while U.S. states next door are booming with Canadian capital. Every quarter that passes without real reforms means more missed opportunities, more capital flight, and more dependence on Washington. The verdict is plain. Trump's America is accelerating, while Carney's Canada is stalled at the starting line. The projects Ottawa promotes as nation-building are little more than recycled press releases. Without pipelines, without an energy corridor, and without bold reform, Canada risks being locked into permanent second place. The consequences are severe: higher costs for families under U.S. tariffs, lost jobs as companies chase friendlier conditions abroad, and the erosion of Canada's leverage in the global economy. Carney had the political capital to act decisively, but he chose hesitation. The opposition's warning is clear. If Ottawa continues to govern with baby steps while America takes giant leaps, Canadians will be left behind in their own continent. The gap is already visible, and unless Canada changes course quickly, that gap could become a canyon too wide to close.